Hey, you are listening to Abyss Gazing, where we celebrate all things spooky and mental health.
I'm your co-host, Mark.
I'm your co-host, Josh.
And I'm your guest, Melissa.
And
Yes,
we're
we are joined by
continuing
the
continuing
writer-director of Torn Together, which you guys can check out the interview with over on our YouTube. We'll provide a link in the show notes below. Screened at Genre Blast this year. So, Mark, where we go? What are we talking about this episode?
we're continuing the journey down the rabbit hole of Phantasm.
God, I hate you.
Such a
That's not
bizarre rabbit hole.
they are so weird. It's such a weird franchise, but the more I get into it, the more I'm like, this is kind of cool. How have I never watched all these?
I've never seen all of them either, but I'm gonna finish them after.
We are we are 2 for 2 for bringing people onto this series and saying like I've seen the first one or I've never seen any of them, and I'm just gonna finish the rest of them and see where this journey goes.
Because they're just
I
so
need to know what
bizarre.
happens
Yeah.
and what kills the tall man because this is some bullshit at this point.
Yeah,
That sounds about right.
we're on number 3 now, as of this episode.
Which
Yeah.
is also the first one to actually have a subtitle with it called
Yeah.
Land of the Dead.
Lord of the Dead.
Lord of the
Lord.
Dead, that's right.
Yeah. And they brought back the original actor of Mikey.
Yeah.
A Michael Baldwin.
Yeah. So we found out last episode that they brought back, was it did they either get a new actor for Reggie or was it the same actor?
So
Reggie's
for
the same,
Go
right?
ahead.
I think
Yeah.
Reggie's the same.
So remember what Andy said is that Reggie was the same, but because 2 was the only one produced by a major studio, with it being Universal, they would not let
Two.
Don Castiglione have 2 unknown actors leading a movie.
Yeah.
So that
So
is the
they had,
reason why Mike was recast in the second one.
but he's back in the third one.
He is. As is Bill Thornberry, who plays Jody in this one as well.
Yeah.
Which he came out of where? I still don't know where Jody was.
So Jody was the
No.
brother in the first one.
Who died.
Right.
Yep.
So, but they
So,
don't explain where he's been, right?
well,
So
they
Kind of.
did, but they didn't. Are
Yeah.
we just saying screw it and getting into spoilers now?
yeah,
Right.
so if you guys haven't watched it, go check it out. It's streaming right now on like Tubi and a bunch of other free ones. But
And it's your
uh
fault at this point if you haven't watched it. It's like 30 years old, 40 years old,
I
something like that.
I took it as he has just bound himself in like the space of the tall man.
How am I picking up on these things in the story and you're not?
What are you talking about?
His brain's in the ball, right?
His
So
brain is in the ball.
the tall man is taking the brains of the dead people, putting them in the ball in the sentinels and controlling them. But for some reason, Jody was able to keep his sentience about him.
Kind of his like free will almost.
Yeah.
Yeah,
He's
yeah,
in
yeah.
He
there.
was able to keep his identity, and the tall man wasn't able to put him under control. That's why he's a sentinel in this one and just kind of shows up as a projection from the sentinel.
That's fair. But this is also the first movie where they've actually introduced that concept, because
Yeah.
the Sentinels had an evolution in the second one where you got to see the different forms that they took. And this is kind of the first one where you're really getting to explore
The
how the tall
creation.
man operates, how he creates, what they actually do with the bodies once they've gotten them. And then they also kind of explain this relationship. They further explain this relationship that Mike has with the tall man and like their connection, where I think that it's kind of like Mike represents the good of that world and the tall man represents the bad, kind of what we talked about last week. But I think that scene where like Mike is like spying on the tall man, and he's like seeing him kind of like create the Sentinel. Kind of is where I'm pulling that from, but I'm curious to
Well,
kind of hear what you guys think about the relationships between the two.
I'm still not positive on their relationship, other than
Hmm.
the fact of I'm wondering if Mikey is like the tall man, and the fact we find out that the tall man is just like a meat exosuit in
Yeah.
this one.
Okay, all right. So like, how? This is another question too. Is
Yes,
like how are these like how are these people like chosen? First off, because like Tim and Mike just kind of seem like average everyday kids. Like, does he like spy on them from like afar? Is he able to like see into the future? Are they like worthy adversaries for him? Like, is he just like bored?
well, they're in a different dimension, right? Because they have the two pillars and they go through to somewhere else. Is he spying from another dimension on ours, or
So it almost seems like he's psychic to some extent, something like that. From what I can tell, I really feel like we're gonna have to do a summary episode in the future and just rewatch all of them. But that's me. But
I
no,
I
it
will put
seemed
you through the Human Centipede trilogy before you put me through these a summary episode first.
you said
I
you were enjoying this.
Look, this one took a sharp turn left for me in terms of quality, so
also, is this the first one where they really lean into the joke about the balls?
I think so.
There's so many ball jokes that I'm just like dying.
Because well, there was
yeah,
only one Sentinel in the first one. There was three Sentinels in the second one, and then
there's a lot more in this one.
they end up
Yeah,
showing a lot more. Yeah, but you end up finding out that he's going from mausoleum to mausoleum to mausoleum, creating more Sentinels as he goes.
mass army.
Okay, all right. So like the scene where they're driving down the road and they've just picked up Rocky. Like Rocky's no longer a tertiary character; she's now a main character, and it's
Yeah.
her, Reggie, and Tim, and the three of them are kind of talking about how like all of these counties are just like being like having people
Like
disappear and the population's just how is nobody like noticing this?
noticing
Like
this?
They even bring that
Exactly.
up. They even make the comment, how has nobody picked up on this in the movie? And I don't think they ever explained as to why
They
nobody's
don't.
noticed. But they're all seem to be backwoods little towns.
This was decent. I
Which
mean,
one?
if you look past the like wreckage of the town, Tim, the little boy, is
Yeah.
that his name? Yeah, Tim.
yeah.
His town looked pretty decent sized. Like he had a
Yeah,
big nice house.
I think when they like entered in, because there's a scene that like actually says like population, like welcome to,
Like,
can't remember the
across
name
the
of the
town.
city.
1,900 people or something.
Yeah,
It's a
so
small
it's
True.
town.
yeah. So I mean, it's like still like 1,900 people go missing, and like you don't notice. Like we also
Nobody
don't
don't
know
know.
like the size of Rocky's town or I can't remember the probably gonna miss Tanisha. Like I was her sidekick in this one. In that scene where they
Forget her
introduce
name.
her.
I don't remember.
I don't
I
remember
got the
either.
IMDb pulled up, so
She was there
uh
for like 2 seconds.
yeah, just died,
She
But
died
yeah,
really well though. It was a good
she
death.
did.
But then they show the Sentinels controlling other people too.
I just want to know, like, understand like the logics of this because like some people that are Sentinels in this sequel, like it just kind of seemed like they contradicted themselves in this one. So some people, and maybe this is just Castiglione like wanting to like be uh freaking ambiguous and try to like approach the story like David Lynch or Chris Nolan. Uh, but some of the quote unquote Sentinel zombies is what I'll call them. Like looked like normal people And then you had them kind of revealed later on to actually be Sentinels. Then you had the three like I guess like drug dealer people from the beginning of the
Whatever.
movie
Yeah.
Whatever
when
they
we meet
were.
Tim that like looks like zombies. So like how
Real
does
zombies.
the yeah, how does the reanimation process in this world work?
But also, aren't the little guys, are they sentinels as well? Because didn't they just throw in the previous, like numbered one and two? I don't remember which one. Didn't they take the people and throw them in barrels and then make them those small? Are they
Yes, yeah,
sentinels
the
as
the
well?
dwarfs.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so it's almost, I would think, and it's not, it's purely opinion, but I would think the Sentinels would be from fresher corpses due to the fact that a corpse would deteriorate and so would the brain.
But then those three people had literally just died.
Right.
And then they look
Like
like they've
Gross.
been
zombies.
dead forever.
Right. And
Oh,
then I think the evil Jawas or whatever we're calling them, because they still just look like little demented Jawas.
Yeah.
I I they're like fermented bodies. I don't know.
They are.
like no, Melissa's 100% correct. They go into those like little like black
Girls.
tubes that yeah, the
Yeah,
barrels that they had in the
And
first
they
two
shoot them.
films.
they ferment them. That's what I'm
Yeah.
saying.
Yeah.
What?
And
Go ahead.
they have an unlimited supply of small robes in this other dimension. Like,
And
I just am
plastic
so confused.
55-gallon drums.
Yeah.
Right. So like, all right, thinking that like Mark, your theory is correct that they would have to be reanimated fresh corpses because the brain deteriorates too quickly. Okay. Then how come in the first two films there are scenes of Mike and Reggie rolling up to mausoleums that are completely 100% empty? Like, if bodies are sitting for more than let's say like a year, you know, like what happens to those bodies? Do they just go into the barrels and become the dwarves, or like
That would be my thought. Because if they need the semi-fresh brains for the Sentinels and the Sentinel zombies, then the dwarves, I would guess, would be the older ones or the leftover bodies from removing the brains.
Hmm. Okay.
all right, so I Googled this. So according to bigthink.com, this is a yes, this is written by a neuropsych psychologist, but they say, quote, the study only reported on brain activity recorded over a period of about 15 minutes. So 15 minutes the brain's still active after death. In
Well, then,
rats, however, experiments have established that after a few seconds, consciousness is lost. So after about 40 seconds, the majority of neural activity has disappeared. So in humans, it looks like it's roughly about 15 minutes, I guess. So, I mean, he would have to be like getting the bodies like quick,
I mean,
fast.
he is a mortician.
he's not though, because remember there's a scene in the graveyard where literally they dug up all the graves, so all the graves were empty. Those
Yeah.
bodies have been in there. So I'm not sure. Maybe those are the little dwarves or something.
Well, like, I don't know if we've like talked about this yet, but like the relationship between the dwarfs is essentially like they work and do the bidding for the tall man. Like,
Hmm.
is that my
Yeah,
correct assumption?
Yeah.
Okay.
yeah. And so do the Sentinels.
Mhm. I have a question. What do you guys think about, and it might not have been the third one, it might have been the second one. Sorry. I watched them all kind of together. When one of the balls is attacking the humans, like some of the humans, but it also starts attacking the other sentinel. Do you remember that? And it was literally one of the guys that was already a sentinel and it was attacking him as well.
Yes, that's the I think you're referring to the butler from the second one
Oh, okay.
because he's got like the yellow like goo that like spits out of him.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So I wonder what the rules are for these sentinels.
Well,
And if the tall man controls them, why would he attack his own?
well, Jody attacked a bunch of them too
Yeah.
as a sentinel.
Hmm.
True, but I'm almost like, all right, so like Jody in this series, how did you guys take it? Was he under the tall man or not? Because he kind of seemed like he had the ability to like, or he had like found a way to actually like stand outside of the tall man's grasp.
I don't think he was under control by the tall man, but I do think there was some influence there because there was a couple times when he was close to the tall man that he shut him down.
Hmm. I would
But
agree.
there's also like there is a scene in particular where like the sentinel that is like kind of like the host to um to Jody like I think it's Reggie like actually throws it at the tall man and the tall man basically like regains control of it. So is it does he just have control over the sentinel body or actually over the spirit being of Mike? I'm sorry, of Jody.
I think it's the sentinel because Jody keeps coming through.
Hmm.
Yeah. Also keeping in this in the mind is that Jody is literally the only one that is being projected out of the ball. Every other sentinel that we see in this, the brain is the host
Yeah.
and kind of like the spot for where the sentinel lies. So that's they're essentially being controlled by the sentinel in the human host, but Mike is kind of like got or Jody's got this kind of like R2D2 thing going on.
And I wonder if that has to do with Mikey having some connection to that other world.
If you or someone you know is listening to this podcast right now and you're struggling with suicide, addiction, self-harm, or depression, we encourage you guys to please reach out. This is the heartbeat of why we do what we do. Suicide is currently the 10th leading cause of death in the United States, and as of this recording, there are 132 suicides that take place each and every day on American soil. And when you scale back internationally, there are 800,000 successful suicides. That is one death roughly every 40 seconds. So if you or someone you know is struggling, you guys can go to victimsandvillains.net/hope. That resource is going to be right in the description wherever you guys are currently listening or streaming this. There you'll find resources that include the National Suicide Lifeline, which is 1-800-273-8255. You can also text HELP to 741-741. We also have a plethora of other resources, including churches, getting connected with counselors, LGBT resources like the Trevor Project, and also veteran hotline as well. Please, if you hear nothing else in the show, understand that you listening to this right now, have value and worth. We get it. Suicide, depression, mental health, these are hard topics, and the stigma around them doesn't make it any easier. But please consider the resources right in the descriptions below wherever you guys are listening, because once again, you have value and you have worth. So please stay with us.
Possibly.
Yeah, I was gonna say like what if like the tall man has like granted this like projection of Jody as a way to like gain the trust of Mike, to come into the world.
Maybe because the end, if you might be actually right, because at the end, he's like, don't believe Does it say something like "Don't believe everything you see" or "Not everything's real" or something like that
Yeah.
towards the end?
Yeah, the it's his says something along the lines of is like seeing is believing is easy, seeing is the problem, which I guess is like also like a really great metaphor when you're talking to like step back from the series when you're talking specifically about like mental health and how we treat mental health is that knowing somebody as a like an issue like depression or anxiety is sometimes like it can sometimes be easy, but like actually like seeing the signs or like being attentive to know the signs of like when someone has like things like depression or anxiety or even is on the verge of wanting to kill themselves, then that's really important as well to know those signs.
I'm digesting that. Thinking about it in relation to the
I'm
film,
like,
but yeah.
she looks like she wants to say something. Let me not interrupt.
I was trying to think of something to me, sorry.
Use
But
your
yeah, just kind of
words.
also like that projection. It's something to do with projection. It kind of went in one ear out the other there. But yeah, I think I would agree. There's something in kind of how if you're feeling depressed or anxious or whatever, and you can kind of see yourself doing one thing, but you're acting a different way. And I think that kind of relates with Jody a little bit. I could see that.
Well, referencing depression and things like that, how often do you hear nobody knew something was wrong?
So many times. Yeah.
You do, but I
Is,
would also like go ahead and finish your thought first.
is that a lack of paying attention to signs, or is that not indicating that there are signs to begin with?
Or you might not know what the signs are or what that would look like for some
Y-
people.
Or
Yeah,
they're
I
not
think
showing you any signs?
so. Depression is this like is this master of masks, right? Like depression knows the right way to have a host and essentially like make them feel like they can blend in and that everything's normal because depression's not going to be the same way for everyone, but I'm talking from my own personal experience. But I think also on top of that, it aside from just having self-depression, but also looking around at other friends that have had depression and having also lost friends to suicide. One of the things I think that also comes down to it is just being really ignorant of like not knowing the signs of, someone who's crying out for help or someone that, has certain traits or certain habits that they do because of their depression or their anxiety or self-mutilation or addictive behavior, so on and so forth. And feel like you can hide it to an extent, but if you're really purposeful in looking for it, you start to really notice the signs and notice the body language and how things like depression and anxiety or addiction can really change the body language of an individual, no matter how good you think you can mask it.
I think a lot of it comes down to how well you know somebody too, and if
That's
you really
true.
know
Yeah.
them.
Yeah.
Yeah, because depression and addiction, like two specifically, will really make or break a relationship. I think there are certain degrees to friendships. I think you have like acquaintances that, people you talk to, maybe you work with, and you have people that are, your internet friends with that you're kind of just like friends. And then but when you start to have things like depression or, these really vulnerable subjects come up, like, body dysmorphia or suicide or self-mutilation, then there's this like threshold that you cross over and it's no longer you're just friends. Now you've kind of like now you're really friends, or like best friends or like brothers or sisters or whatever you want to however you want to call that.
Talking about the levels of friendship and that whole internet friendship thing, that's kind of new within what, like the past decade?
It is, yeah.
And even then, you don't really know who you're talking to.
You don't until you get onto a podcast and start talking about Zac Efron, and then you know.
Yeah.
So.
And then come over and have a smoked chicken.
And then
True
you're talking
story.
to independent directors about, weird movies from the 90s.
But yeah, I definitely have some people that I am just internet friends with that I've never really met in real life, or at least had a meaningful conversation with. So that's interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's
that's almost like a new concept, and it's over the last 10 years maybe
10 to
Mhm.
15
has
years.
really, yeah. And you run into now so many people don't know how to have that personal interaction with people. They only know how to do that texting or chatting through apps. And
Hmm.
it causes so much issues, because how are you supposed to know if somebody's having problems dealing with depression or anything if the only thing you do is text with them? And that's more common nowadays of communication
Very common.
than,
Yep.
yeah, than 10, 20 years ago, everybody getting together around a fire pit, having a drink and laughing and talking and hanging out. A lot of people don't know how to do that anymore. It's not a normal social function for a lot of people.
And a lot of those conversations are emojis and memes, so
Yeah.
they're not even actual sentences.
It also comes down to being with intentionality as well, because I agree with everything you guys are saying. Like some of the people I talk to on a daily basis are exactly those types of relationships. They are memes and emojis, right? And then there are other people that I'm having like full blown, like legitimate conversations with,
Mm.
and these really deep ones. Like that's been almost every conversation I've had with my other co-host from That's High Praise for the last 2 weeks, has just been these really deep, you know theological and deep, moving, like really emotional, really vulnerable conversations. And have those kind of conversations in a text is really vulnerable, because text is like you can't set the tone the way that you can hearing someone's voice or seeing someone's type of thing. So it's I think it's also like really like careful. Like you have to create like a safe environment for someone to really open up in that way.
Yeah.
Well,
And there has to
texting leaves a lot of also vulnerability, because now it's in writing.
yeah.
And for some people, they see that as something that can be used against them later. See,
I
remember when you said this kind of thing?
Yeah. And I'm always like really, I feel like I'm overly cautious about like things that like I put out there, like whether that's behind the mic on one of the podcasts that I'm a host of, or when reviewing a film and talking about mental health. Like I'm very sacred about the things that I put out there because of stuff like that. Um and so, like, I think sometimes, when we come to this idea of understanding the mental health of others, that conversation, especially in the age of the internet, also comes into understanding the mental health of yourself, and under setting boundaries for yourself, knowing what you can and cannot take. Like if you're easily offended, not putting out something that's gonna, create a lot of controversy and possible hurt. But also at the same time, like just doing stuff that are gonna make you happy. And I know that's been a journey that I've been on for the last year, is like understanding like my own boundaries of like what's gonna make my mental health better, and what affects it in a negative way.
Yeah. I'd agree. I set a lot of boundaries, I think, this year, just for mental health purposes. So it's
I
kind of
may
hard to
have,
do.
Articulate.
I may
Yeah.
have too many with a lot of people, and it's just more out of safety reasons than anything else. The less
Sorry, Mark.
people, the less ammo you give people, the less you have to deal with. So
Yeah.
I tend not to share a whole lot about a lot of things.
Yeah. That's fine. That's all right.
Wish it
I
we
don't.
didn't have to do that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
a lot of it
it's
comes
welcome to
from
the
just
age. Yeah.
a lot of it comes from bad experiences over the years.
Yeah.
Trusting
Yeah.
the wrong people, saying the wrong thing to the wrong person ends up somewhere else she didn't need it to go. Things like that. So
Or saying something that was taken the wrong way and the offense has already been created, and no matter how much you try to explain yourself, they don't want to hear you.
yeah.
Because they've already taken it. And I mean, again, like that's just kind of the age that we live in, unfortunately, and we're at this spot now where it's just like, all right, let's find the people that you feel safe around and
Hmm.
create those. And what I think is like to bring it back to Phantasm, what I think is really interesting about um about the group, that no matter how much the group evolves, where you look at the second film and it is Reggie, Mike, and two additional people that have found their way into them. One was a hitchhiker, one had a psychic connection to Mike, and then you look at this one and it's just kind of this like ragtag team, but you look at the consistency through all three films and it's um it's Reggie and it's Mike. That's the through line for all of these three films, and it's a lesson and a reminder that you can have your circle fluctuate, but at the end of the day, there's always going to be, those 1 to 3 people that are always going to be there, that are always going to be positive for your mental health, that are going to walk through the flames for you, get in the trenches for you, stay through the hurricanes, and laugh and love and just stand their ground with you and vice versa.
Great. You got to have your core group.
I'm curious what other conspiracy and what other questions you guys had. How do you guys think this like how does this film in terms of like sequel and continuing the story compare to you to the other two films in the series?
Each episode seems to be having more questions than answers, which is making them be a little bit more confusing, but a lot of the answers are coming in little things that if you're not paying attention, you don't catch.
Yeah. I just found this is probably not the best to say, but I just found that they get a little more cheesy as we go on. Um, this one, the jokes were killing me. I'm like,
I mean, you're
just
not
kept going. They
wrong.
were really funny jokes, but I was like, oh no, this is where we're going. Okay.
Yeah, you're not
Nothing's getting
wrong. They,
no. The what did he say? The Reggie was like, "Oh, I hope that ball has better direction than mine," or something.
God.
It's stupid when they were trying to use it to navigate. I don't in the car. I was like, "Oh
Uh,
goodness."
I think probably one of the worst scenes for me. I agree. I think this is a little bit of a dip in quality from the first two, and I think it's the writing is like really cheesy in this one. The writing in particular, like the scene that like sticks out to me is when you got when Reggie's having the dream where him and Rocky are like looking up, and Jody just appears on the chair as like he's like cuckold, and he's just
Yeah.
watching it. The writing in that scene was so bad, and then with like he's like, oh yeah, he's like Reggie's like, I'm focusing on like the sex that I'm having now, and like just Rocky's response was really cringy, but then like Jody leaves, and then like Reggie loses interest in sex, and I'm just like, this seems so weird and such a bad writing. So bad.
or trying to talk the kid into staying in the back seat of the car.
Oh my God, he is such a creeper. I just can't. Reggie is such a creep.
I like in my notes as I was like writing this because like Reggie was like the one guy that had like the awkward sex scene in part two. I was like, why is Reggie like always like so horny?
Always, like in the
Always.
most random situations. Like,
and
don't
with hitchhikers.
just with random women that he doesn't know
Like
at all.
I don't know how you guys felt, but Rocky was like really intimidating. It's in this like she would be like a great ally to like fight the tall man with, but like she would never be someone that I'd be like, you want to hook up? Because she just seems like she would like hurt me.
But they're going in
She'd
the
do exactly what she did to Reggie, and she would handcuff you to the bed and go to sleep. Like she's like, no.
Hi.
but I mean, it appears that they're heading towards the end of the world event.
Mhm.
So that might change some discussions and decisions you're having there.
I'm
True.
glad you brought that up.
Later.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because I think another thing that this is the first Phantasm sequel I've come into where I've had like preconceived notions and like expectations where like
That's your problem.
yes, I will say that because like the first the ending of the second one kind of where they teased like the tall man's world, that's kind of what I was expecting. I was expecting that this was going to be like an exploration of the tall man's world, his dimension and region of where he comes from. And no, we're kind of given this like Mad Max like ragtag team like apocalyptic movie. And I have to say what it's like this is not a terrible movie, but it feels like a missed opportunity.
Well, I mean, these movies are getting stranger. The biggest issue I have is that they're not answering enough questions from the previous movies. Or I haven't noticed anything to answer them yet, one or the other. That's my biggest issues.
I think that it feels like they're just adding in as much bizarre things as they possibly can that just create more questions. And I really hope that I get some answers by the last one.
I keep coming back to David Lynch. And as we were talking about these series, because Lynch is famous for creating these really bizarre but really like deep movies and like also Twin Peaks, where you have Twin Peaks is television, so it's not film. Uh, but he's very ambiguous with the stories that he's telling, and you know, every time someone will be like, what does it mean when Dale Cooper said this or when their other characters are this way, what does it mean? And you're kind of just left with this like figure it out, make your own kind of thing. And I'm kind of it'll kind of like I like the fact that these films are focusing on like world expansions and not necessarily addressing the questions that you had from the previous installments. Kind of making your own conclusion. I respect that.
As long as
Yeah.
we get a couple answers by the end, just really want to know what's the deal with the tall man and how you kill him. So he better die on the last one.
So somehow he's being made out to be a supernatural being of some sort.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
Cold has, which is interesting because Jason had water, Freddy had fire.
Yeah.
And they're indicating that the cold has something to do with the tall man.
How do you guys feel about like the cold? Because it just kind of seemed like they like Castiglione or Cos however you say his name. Like it just seems like Donnie Boy like looked at the first film and was like, we haven't done anything with this scene yet. Just the scene of like Mike loading or Reggie loading up his ice cream truck and Tall Man just kind of having that stare off with
There,
young Mike. So like, how do you guys feel about like Cold being his weakness?
I think it's kind of a lame, to be honest. Does that mean he can't like take over towns in like Alaska in the middle of winter? Like what? Does he have to be so selective on towns then?
Wouldn't he want to head south at that point?
Yeah. So if he's in the license plate is Oregon, right? On the car?
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he's not quite south.
The Himikutas are still the best part of the movies. But I'm a car guy, so that's me.
That car is really nice.
Oh,
How'd you feel about the little boy driving?
Oh man.
He
That was
couldn't
just one of
feel
those
the
like
steering wheel.
that was just one of those like cringy moments also because like he like handed him like the keys and he's just like, all right, gee willikers, and then he gets behind the wheel and like Reggie's just kind of like holding on for dear life.
Well, I'm a car guy. So every time I see the black Hemikutas in these movies, especially his convertible one, the last one, I've seen a matching numbers Hemikuta before, with a price tag on it, all original. That was a decade ago, $2 million car.
Woo!
And they've wrecked how many of them in this series in the
They
80s,
wrecked the last one.
70s, 80s? And it like hurts me every time they show it in the movie. It's like, oh, we're just going to stick the kid behind the steering wheel now. And it's like, I know it's not a real Himikuta because they couldn't have been that stupid in the 80s and 90s.
No.
But at the same time, it's like, Jesus, you guys are idiots. Who would ever do that?
Reggie would do that.
Yeah.
I like cars too much for that.
How would you guys like to help us get mental health resources into schools, conventions, and other events? Well, now you can. Simply go to patreon.com/victims and villains for as little as $1 a month. You guys can help us get mental health resources into current and upcoming generations, educate and break down stigma surrounding mental health, suicide, and depression. And you get exclusive content that you can't get anywhere else. And you guys can tell us which Nicolas Cage movie you want us to cover, and we'll do it. All it takes to get started is to go to patreon.com/victims and villains, or simply click the link in the episode description wherever you guys are currently listening or streaming this episode. Pick your tier and get started today. Yes, it's that simple. So quickly select the tier that you want and help us get hope into the hands of the depressed and the suicidal today.
I don't
There's
know. Go ahead,
oh,
Melissa.
I was gonna say there's one other thing that really bothered me, and it's like a dumb thing, but the opening scene where he has, the double sawed-off shotgun, however
Yeah.
they rigged that together with the four bullets, when he looks up in a tree and pulls the trigger, and the bullets go in four different directions, apparently, because the little guys just fall out of the tree randomly, all far apart. And I was like, the bullets all go kind of
That was
right
awesome.
here, this direction. They don't go this way.
That was fantastic.
They're special bullets.
Like, I laughed so hard.
Which is like also like somewhat of a retcon from the second one because there's a similar scene where he like shoots them, but like they're like right next to each other and like right behind each other. So it's like more believable that like the bullets would go that way. But you're right, like it's just kind of like we're boomerangs now.
Okay, that's how guns work. That just made me laugh. So I was just like, okay, that set up the whole movie for me because I'm like, oh, right, okay. We're going here right from the beginning.
This movie's like right out of the gate, like you're right. Like it sets out that it's gonna be like I had that same viewing experience where it's kind of like, all right out the gate, clearly there's a budgetary difference from the first two films.
Yeah.
And there's also a little bit of like a quality dip from the first two films. And it just as it progressed, like it's still a fun movie. It just kind of gets like cheesier and cheesier, but I feel like every franchise has that one entry that
They
every
do.
fan, yeah, that every fan like dreads the rewatch of or like will avoid. But it's kind of hard to do that in a series with Phantasm because like every movie is essentially expanding the
Weirder.
story and the
Mhm.
lore and the mythology. So it's like crucial to the actual like overarching story.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we still have two more to go.
There's only two more?
There's five
Yes.
total.
Five.
There's
I'm
Oblivion
gonna be
and
watching.
then there's the
Ravager.
Ravager.
So yeah, we're gonna end up finding out how this goes down over the next couple weeks.
Do you think that the tall man has any ties to like an actual person? Like, was he an actual person from Earth at one point? Because
I
it's a
think,
brain, it's a sentinel brain.
yeah, I think he may have been at one point, and whoever that sentinel was created to house the brain of, took over the original tall man.
Hmm. I'm kind of hoping it's like the original tall man created this whole process somehow and put his own brain in there as like the first or something.
It's possible they did show a picture in, I think, the first one back in like Civil War
Yeah.
of the tall man on a horse and carriage, a horse-drawn hearse or whatever.
But also too, like if I remember correctly, like I think like Steve, when we did the first episode, was saying that there is like a prequel that like goes back and kind of like explains his origins in one of these sequels. And it would they could be doing the subspecies route where like they had the first four films kind of like tell this overarching story, and then you have um like one that's like randomly like a origin story that explains how everything began. So
Well,
Interesting.
that would mean four would end up having to be that one, I think, because I think five is more on a major scale.
yeah, Angus. Well, I mean, would make more sense for it to be four, not five, because Angus Scrim is not getting any younger. So,
Well, I think he died
He did. He's not in
before.
five.
Yeah,
really,
he's not listed as N5. I think
Mm-mm.
he died before they taped it.
I watched the trailers for all of them, and it looks like a different actor in five.
now
They
I'm
made him
like
up to look like
really
him, I think, but
curious.
it doesn't look. It's not really him.
Yeah, he died actually the same year that
Well,
oh
his
he
in each movie, his facial features kind of change a lot.
so apparently
If you notice that,
I yeah, well I'm on Google right now and Ravager Ravager has him listed as the tall man on Google. These pictures look like a really old version of him, but still the same actor.
yeah.
Um,
I was gonna say when I watched, it, I was like, I don't think that's him.
yeah, I
But no,
am.
oh, good. So he made it all the way through. Okay.
Yeah, I think five will be the last one because he actually died the before five was released. Yeah, so he died in January of 2016, and it actually came out uh October of 2016.
So he probably did the taping and then died shortly after taping.
Yeah. So I we can end on this fun trivia fact here for you guys. So there is an alternative ending that was filmed for this movie but not used. This alternative ending would have seen Reggie and Tim travel up to the wild regions of Alaska. Reggie digs a small hole in the ice, and Tim places a little case containing the tall man's gold sphere inside. Subsequently, Reggie puts a metal plaque over the hole and seals it up. The plaque reads, "Here lies the tall man. Rest in peace." Reggie says now all we have to do is worry about global warming, and then they walk off.
This is, I think this has also been the first one that seems like it was designed to have a sequel.
I don't know, because like I feel like one of the things that, like, for better or for worse, that Pasolini does with these movies is there is a moment where it feels like the story could literally end right here, and then it kind of gets that second wind, and it just has this like cliffhanger it ends on. Um yeah, and to me, like, I think it's like the makings of like good storytelling, but it's also kind of frustrating. So I don't know. I felt like the second one definitely could have done it, like, felt like it was set up for a sequel. This one feels like it's set up for a sequel. So I'm curious to see how definitive, when we get to Ravager, how like definitive of an ending it feels.
I'm just amused by the fact that so far all the guests we've had on for this have all been like, I have to see how the ending of the series is.
Yeah. You can't start this and not finish. I mean, as much as I make fun of all the things, it's really entertaining.
Yes.
So I'm
a
gonna
lot of
finish it.
a lot of these movies like this, that's the whole purpose of them. You watch them
Yeah.
for the cheese.
Like, if you want a good laugh, yeah, highly recommend it. And it has some good, like, I mean, for the time, some good special effects, a good ick factor with the yellow blood, and it's just like in your mouth in some scenes,
Yeah, and
skin coming off. Like,
that's some of the things we brought up on the previous two episodes covering Phantasm, is some of those special effects are just fantastic.
hmm?
Like the creature coming out of the girl's back in the second one.
So good. Yes. I enjoyed in this one, and it's just because like I could feel it like in my nose when it was happening on the screen, where the like creature at the end of the when it went up Reggie's nose and
Yeah.
she cut it off, Rocky cut it off, and he's like pulling it out, and I'm like, how far is it?
Yeah, those
Yeah.
creatures are what I want to see more of, because they were
Yeah.
teased in the second one. They're teased here, so I want to see more of them. I just want to jump into the world of the tall man and like get to explore that weird 90s nightmare that they explored and got inspired by Pearl Jam.
I just feel like they had really good drugs.
Like mushrooms and acid trips going on in the writing room. Like
Yeah.
this is what's happening.
Yeah. All right. Well, that is going to do it for Phantasm 3, Lord of the Dead. Please go check out the episode, the interview that Melissa and I did, talking about her short film, Torn Together, the writing, the mental health of it, the creativity behind it. Melissa, where can people find you online?
You can find me on Instagram, Life Love Adventures. You can find me on Facebook for I think it's Torn Together Film. But yeah,
And where are you guys? Do you guys have any festivals coming up that you want to promote, or anything, any
the
appearances
moment,
coming up?
no, we just finished with the festivals that we were in, and then I'm still pending for a few festivals. So you can follow up on Instagram or Facebook page.
So if you guys get a chance to see it, not only do I recommend it, it was also one of our top 10 picks for best shorts at this year's Genre Blast. So speaks to the quality. So go check it out. It's weird, it's wonderful, and it's beautiful. Mark, where can people find you online?
Nowhere right now. We had this discussion last episode, so I'm trying to get some projects done to start working on some display and competition pieces. So right now I'm not really doing anything intentionally because I got to get some other projects done first.
Well, you
So
can hear them right here on Abyss Gazing. So hit that subscribe button wherever you guys are currently listening to this podcast from. And while you're at it, you guys can also check out my other podcast. That's High Praise, a Nicolas Cage podcast. And you guys can follow me, Captain Nostalgia, over on Letterbox. And of course, you guys can also follow our parent company, Victims and Villains. We are on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, wherever you guys get your podcast from, and Patreon. So until next time, remember, the longer you gaze into the abyss, the more the abyss gazes back into you.